Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar, Wednesday, 12 o'clock. So we're here again. And thanks for joining us today. Today, we're moving away from the Microsoft 365 products, and we're looking at the work of our national standards team, which is helping policing and the tech industry to join together to ensure that the technologies, the products and the services that policing is using and procuring are designed to work together with existing systems and approaches. We'll hear from Brendan in a second and Matt from the team, who will take us through what the standards are and a quick demonstration of the National Standards platform where you can see them, where you can get involved in it. But hopefully you'll stay with us and ask your questions. That's one of the most really important points we want to make. Get your questions into the chat panel. We want this session to be as interactive as we can and cover all the details that you want to cover. And of course, as always, the feedback form's there. If you've got any feedback to give us about the webinars or subjects you'd like to cover, either just grab your phone, scan that little QR code with your phone, and that'll open the form up for you. Or there's a nice little shortened URL that's a little bit easier to remember. Just grab a screenshot, and obviously the links will be in the chat as normal. In terms of upcoming events in the next couple of weeks, we've got Tom's Top Tips next week, which is going to be a really helpful session for anybody using 365. Really good opportunity to come and learn some of the basics that we all assume people know and don't always. And then we're having a week off for half term, but there'll be a replay for you to get involved in. Then Stop Search Scrutiny, a collaboration workshop which picks up on the Federation one we did a couple of weeks ago, and then we'll be launching the Operation Hampshire on the 9th of March. So we do hope you can join us for those sessions. So let's get into today's session a little bit more. So in simple terms, what are the national standards? We all know what standards are and they affect our daily lives. You can go into because of standards, we can go into a shop and buy an electronic device knowing the power socket will fit into the wall socket. And if you think about the challenges we've had over mixed standards over the years in our personal lives, again, think about USB cables and the amount of different phone USB cables we used to have, depending on which phone make or which model. But pretty much now, most modern phones have adopted a typical standard USB-C for charging. So again, this just shows the value of standards. In policing, of course, we are full of standards, and think about in terms of the data standards, format of registration numbers. And it's fair to say sometimes the standards have come in from the technology rather than perhaps the business need. And it's certainly made it very complex to make different data sets held in different systems to be able to be talked together and to provide that holistic picture for our officers on the ground and colleagues in the back office, which we need for data standards and for good decisions. So this is where the national standards come in. So let's get into Brendan and bring Brendan on screen. Brendan's going to share his screen in a second with us and take us through a quick overview of where we're at in terms of the standards. Off you go, Brendan.
Okay, thanks, David. Just minimize you there. Okay, so hi, I'm Brendan Johnston. I'm the National Standards Lead at the Police Digital Service and responsible for running the National Standards Programme. I want to start off by saying that one of the main benefits to the work that we're doing is the fact that we now have a central repository for data and technical standards. You don't have to search all over the internet to find the best technical guidance. We signpost where all of the best standards are. And when I say we, I don't just mean myself and Matt, who make the national standards team. We've also established quite a wide network of experts from across policing and from across the private sector who all review and recommend standards for policing. Okay, so a little bit about the background of the programme. So we started in May 2020 and we went live in April of last year. So we've been live now for about 10 months. The scope of the programme is data and technical standards, as I mentioned. We don't do professional standards. That's very much the remit of the College of Policing. And while we do work quite closely with the college, we don't overlap in terms of the standards that we focus on. And the ethos is very much one of enablement. We don't dictate to policing what standards they have to adopt. We see ourselves as a team that will do the legwork in the background to help policing find and consume the standards that they actually need. And the overall objective is to bring together policing, the Home Office and the private sector in a common approach for data and technical standards, which is what we've done. For the first time, we have representatives from across each of those areas, all working together, focusing on data and technical standards for policing. Okay, so broadly speaking, the National Standards Programme falls into four components. We have our technical component, we have our governance framework, we have our community of practitioners, and then we have the work that we do at a national level to try and align on standards. So the first thing we did was to start up a platform for hosting and promoting standards. Something that's collaborative, interactive, allows you to search and filter for standards based on your own requirements. I think we've got about 150 standards on the platform at the moment, and they've all been tagged and categorized to make them easier to find. And we've also created summary abstracts for every standard on the platform as well, so you can see quite quickly at a glance what the intended use of that standard actually is. And that's going to give us a demo in a few minutes. The next thing we did was to establish that governance framework to provide the appropriate direction and oversight. What we did is we established two boards. We have our governance board, which is chaired by our SRO Chief Constable Joe Farrell, and they meet quarterly to set the direction. They tell us what we should be working on. So they'll say work on data standards or code standards, or go off and work on trying to resolve interoperability issues in policing systems. And they're overall responsible for ensuring that we keep in line with policing strategy. Now, sitting just below that is our assurance board. The assurance board meets monthly, and they review and process and approve all of the requests that we get through the standards platform. And that assurance board it's staffed by representatives from policing and the private sector as well. And all of that is backed up by our community of practitioners. So we have established 15 practitioner groups across a range of categories, such as forensics, data, security, etc. And we engage with this community with every single request that we get to source a new standard. And what that does is it just provides another level of assurance that anything that we load onto the platform is fit for purpose. It's not just myself and Matt or the assurance board making decisions about these standards or reviewing them. It's actual practitioners, it's actual experts in each of these areas that do that and provide that feedback. And then the final component is the work that we do nationally to align with standards. So there are many independent UK bodies, international bodies, and government departments that can influence all the standards that we use and adopt. I'm thinking specifically about the likes of the GDS Data Standards Authority or the National Cybersecurity Centre. What we do is we try to work with as many of these bodies as possible to align on strategies, to make sure we're all aligning on the same data strategy and the same technical strategies, and just to ensure that we're not developing competing versions of the same standards. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Matt now, who's going to give us a demo, and then I think we'll take questions after that.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everyone. Matt Worley here, PDS, supporting the National Standards workstream here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. OK, do shout if you can't see. OK, so this is the National Standards platform. It's just a website. A few things I want to call out on this first page is you'll see the Knowledge Hub icon here, top left. Although it does use that domain, it's not within the Knowledge Hub itself. That's a deliberate design choice because standards are often hard enough to get to grips with. We found ensuring that they're open and really easy to access means it's a much more higher likelihood of jumping in and using them and find them as quickly as possible. So it's an open site. Majority is official graded material. Where there's official sensitive standards, that's signposted that it is secured elsewhere, but at least you can find that they exist on this site. Next thing I want to mention is our name, National Standards, which actually is a bit of a misnomer there, because it's not just standards we have on the platform here. It's a whole range of things. We have principles, policies, yes, standards too, of course, but also probably heavily featuring here is guidance and guidelines, as well as some templates and technical reference data. And this really helps act as a toolkit to be used for any given use case that you're in. So whether you're having to design, perhaps a force policy, make a procurement decision, work out a route to market, or even a technical query, what's national direction, this helps point you in the right direction at the right sort of level that you're looking at. We do have some gradings too to help prioritize which standards to look at, because there's no shortage of standards for pretty much anything, and they're in 3 sort of categories of you must have, should have, or could have. So you must have all your legal requirements. So GDPR, we have to comply with that. There's no choice. And those standards are pushed to the top of the list, first of all. And forgive me, I will use the term standards, but by that I mean everything, including principles, policy, standards, guidance, technical reference. It's just a bit of a mouthful to say that every single time. So yes, you can have the must-have legally mandated standards. Fine, okay, we're happy. That's the law telling us to do them. We're going to have shortly some police minimum requirement standards. They're from the relevant NPCC portfolio leads, who are the experts in the area in policing, putting their weight behind it, saying yes, actually, I recommend policing should adopt this document, this guidance, this principle for that given area. Not mandated, but it's an indication that that's where the future lies, and that help you comply with that direction on a national level. And finally, the third one is that could have is designed for policing, DFP, and that's where, of all the myriad standards out there, this one in particular has been designed with policing in mind. It should be cheaper, easier, more effective to implement. For example, an ISO standard has been designed not with policing in mind, though totally applicable, whereas something perhaps maybe from the college, or perhaps from PDF, for example, maybe designed exactly with police forces in mind and their unique positioning and landscape. I'm going to cover 2 other things here. So one is our categories page. So if you're not sure where to start off, jump on categories. We have 15 categories, of which we have a community group aligned to each one of these. So that helps you understand exactly where you should start off if you're not sure where to go first of all. Also explains where our groups are at. So if you're just interested in analytics, you can just join the analytics group. The search page itself, hopefully you'll see it's pretty simple. You can use a free text search box top and bottom here. It'll search for the title, the abstract. It won't search for the content or the attachments or anything. That's just to be aware of. But by default, it'll show you things which are live. And the filters work with anything. So if you were to click on data as a category, for example, it'll highlight everything that's live and has a category of data. If you want to remove it, click the X. It'll show things which aren't live. You see quite clearly here that the grayed out show that these aren't live. They've either been retired, they're still in draft. These ones right now are up for this month for community comment, for example. So you see quite clearly what's live and what's not. If I were to re-click on live, it re-adds the filter, reloads the results, and here we go. You'll see those must-have LMR ones that push to the top of the list, so you can be assured that you're going to see them first before anything else. But you can pick and choose whatever level of document you need. You've got some help text here to pull down if you get lost. So you can add whatever filters you need before you get a reasonable amount of options on the right hand side, then eyeball manually to go through. So look at this, I think, right, great, yeah, data protection, that's just what I'm looking for. This is our abstract, which we'll usually take from the source material, but now and again, if it's totally wordy and not really appropriate, we'll write something ourselves to make sure it's really quick to understand what it's about, what its use is. And the other thing I want to draw your attention to here is we'll have the attached version here, not with official sensitive, for obvious reasons, won't be shared this way, but the attached version is what was approved by the community and by the National Assurance Board when it went through the process. And so you can have some assurance if you're looking at perhaps a version that's different to that, you think, well, which one should I use? As long as you use the attached version as a basis moving forward, you can be assured that's been the approved one. It might have been an updated version, in which case do flag up to us. We do review them regularly, but not as regularly as we might like to. So we can also review that and say, ha, it's updated. Are we happy with the updates? If so, put them through the process and then get the platform updated. So that's in effect all you need to know to find the relevant standards involved in whatever your perhaps use case is. If ever you need some perhaps additional help or think, well, where else should I go? We do have a use case tab here which talks about a common journey most policing services or products go through, and that gives some examples of the use case here, some fictional biometric smart cuffs of some standards that you might have drawn out, asking questions relating to each of these. So everything will generally go through some sort of procurement, a design phase, looking about data transit, retention, and often forgotten about is that disposal, both of hardware, software, and the data behind it too. So how we're going to unmarry that at the end to ensure that we can use the data effectively without risking it being lost or at a huge expense to reuse it. But to get involved, I now would implore, my call to action to all of you today is to get involved. Please do. If you've got a relevant interest in one of those groups, is to click on the Contact Us group and join one of our category groups. So by clicking that Contact Us tab, brings you to our little contact portal here, and this is where you can say, hey, I want to be added to that relevant community group. This is where you can say, hey, I work in perhaps security, well, add me to the security group. Or actually, I work in a lot of things, add me to them all, I want to know all about them. All it means is that each month you'll get a little Sway newsletter saying, hey, these are the 6 things that have changed, and then the relevant updates. And it keeps us in the back of your mind. So next time you go to a problem, you'll think, I remember National Standards team, I'll check there first of all before I start Googling and asking around colleagues, etc. And that's really all I want to show you right now. I'll be led by questions that have come in to demonstrate anything else. I'll hand back to David and Brendan for any questions.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to put a question straight back to yourself first of all. So who in a force should be really looking at the standards when they're considering a change in their organisation or their structure or department or even a business system?
Yeah, so I think we've designed it to ensure that anyone at whatever level can make use of the platform. So we have those sort of low-level templates or even standards per se to work out, well, that's how you do something. But if you're more looking at how to make an organisational change, you're curious to know where that national strategy is going, you can change the filter to show just principles, perhaps more high level. And especially of importance is looking for those PMR gradings. So that's got the weight of the national lead behind it. So you can have some assurance knowing that if I use this principle, if I use this guidance, I am converging with the national landscape for that particular area.
Thanks. And we want some questions from you guys listening into this today, but I've got a question that is coming from Kevin, which I'm going to push towards Brendan. So the reason that policing is in such a mess, there's no agency, Home Office, HMRC, college, etc., and they don't mandate what policing should do. Therefore, policing does what it thinks is right. Hence the divergence. Why don't you mandate the standards if this is what you believe to be the right thing to do?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for someone to start off by saying that the mandating standards is always a very difficult thing to do because it's quite a wide brush to apply across such a wide area across policing. But now that we have the national standards platform, now that we have that governance model in place, now that we have those gradings that Matt was talking about, we can now start to align on the right standards. Previously, without a central repository, it was just impossible to work out who was working on what standard. There was police forces developing their own competing versions of the same standard, the same in the private sector. But now that we have the platform, we can start to converge, and that makes that mandation piece a little bit easier to do.
And the challenge, of course, is that each of the forces are separate organisations, and the mandate is who has the capability of providing a mandate. It's clear where the ones that are legally obliged, you've marked them in the standards platform, haven't you already?
Yeah, correct. Sorry, and the I'm not sure if that was a question, David, there, or just a statement.
But yeah. It's just so you can the ones that are like GDPR, etc., that are already in place, they are clearly marked as such, aren't they?
Sorry, yes, they are. Yeah, they are.
Okay. So in terms of how people can access them, now you open this up to the tech industry as well, don't you, Matt? And do you get some feedback through the community consultation from the tech industry themselves?
Yeah, that's right. So we're really keen to ensure that nothing goes on the platform that's a surprise to anyone, both, of course, policing, but also suppliers too, as they've got a role to play in ensuring that things they're developing in the future do align to what we expect, what we want them to do. But they can't do that without understanding what those requirements are, at least where the direction's going. So we have member of, I think it's Tech UK, as well as other suppliers on our boards to ensure that anything that's coming through, we need some consultation, they're that single point of contact for that. But further than that too, by joining these community groups, having them open, suppliers can join them too. So some of the larger incumbent records management supply groups, suppliers rather, will join that particular community group, and they'll be able to have feedback in advance, usually 4 to 6 weeks before proposed going live, for them to give feedback and saying, hey, this standard perhaps doesn't quite work, or maybe there's something better to consider. And that ensures we get that holistic view both from suppliers and policing before anything goes live, ensuring that everyone's on the same page and we've addressed any issues with enough notice.
So if somebody searches on the standards page looking for some help because they're transforming something in their area of business and they're not there, how can they engage with the team to get help and to perhaps have a standard developed alongside them?
Yes, that's a really important part of our site, and we're really keen to call out if you can't find what you're looking for. That is so important for us to know, because if you're looking for it on the site, there's a reason for that. We'd love to know more about what that gap is that you've found. So you can do that by, it's the same process before of, and if I might just share my screen to highlight that, it's as simple as going onto that Contact Us tab, clicking the want to raise an issue button there, and from that saying, hey, either I've got a general policing problem, maybe it's, I don't know, you're looking at drones being brought in, you know what technical guidance there is around that, or how to retain the personal data gathered as part of that, or maybe saying, hey, actually we need a new standard, and actually I found one. You can even upload an example of what you're talking about, and that ensures that you can raise that gap. You can say, hey, I was looking for something, and even if you've not found what it is, let us know. That's our job as a team, to do the legwork for you, so you can go back to your day job while we in the background research it. And we'll go out to academia, business, law enforcement, national, international, and there's often something that already exists, and we're keen to not develop things just for the sake of it. We'd much rather have something that's already been tried, tested before, and is in common parlance and use. And this is how we can do that. It's really, really short and quick, just saying what is the new standard you'd like to see, why is it relevant for policing, and then hit send. As simple as that. And that's why the whole reason behind this whole platform is it's simple, it's really quick to use, hopefully, and it's useful for the purposes just talked about.
No problem. Thanks, Matt. And one of the other points, of course, is that the standards piece is a really pivotal part of how we're delivering the national DDAT strategy, the digital data and technology strategy. So, Brendan, you guys link in closely with the PDS data office, which has just been established, and that's helping to form things, and it almost addresses some of the mandate issue as well. Forces will still have a choice, but they've all aligned to the national DDAT strategy. What are the benefits for forces picking up a strategy rather than going on their own decisions?
Well, maybe again, it just goes to that kind of, it's managed from the centre more than anything else, David. It's rather than doing these things 43 different ways. There is a central function, the data office, the standards function, that will we keep saying it, will do the legwork on behalf of policing to find what the best approaches are, what the best standards are, what the best DDAT standards are, and again, it's up to policing to choose what it is they want to adopt. This has not been mandated to them, but it has been reviewed and agreed by a central function. So that's what the value is. That it's not a randomly picked set of strategies.
And of course, we're doing this with policing, for policing, on behalf of policing, to set these standards. And the way that you consult with the community means that the community have got a say, the policing community, about what standards should be there. And then with the industry, you're able to consult with the industry. Is that going to be deliverable? Is that how the cycle seems to work?
Very much so, yes. I mean, we try to keep policing at the forefront at every part of the process. The requests that come from policing and the private sector. We have representatives from the policing and private sector on all of our boards, our community, our practitioners, which is, I mean, our community of practitioners. Although I fired up a slide that had 4 components, but in actual size and importance, that community is huge. That's our direct contact with policing and with the private sector, and that's how they have that say.
And of course, the consequences of having your own standard in each force is a local cost, then, isn't it? The variance, the challenge with interoperabilities that come in. If you can't share data across borders, that becomes harder and harder for you locally. A couple of other questions come in. So we've got: is it possible for suppliers, Matt, to access the standards portal, and how do we join the community groups?
Great, and absolutely, as mentioned, it's an open website. We'll pop the link in the chat for you to click on it and have a little rummage through yourselves. But absolutely, we welcome and encourage anyone with interest in any of those 15 areas, or all of them, to sign up to those groups, as we covered with that Contact Us tab. Select Join a Community Category Group, and then tick whichever ones are of interest.
Thanks. And there's a question in from: how does it link in with work currently being done by the National Disability Access Working Group? Have you built any links with them yet, or is that group got established?
Yep, so I've attended one of the early boards, perhaps, looking at just that sort of thing. What sort of standards and information can we have on the platform to help really inform both policing and suppliers moving forward, to ensure that those accessibility requirements are captured? We're still a work in progress, so we have things like the website accessibility regulations signposted on the site, but of course there's lots more to be done, and we welcome really any engagement around this too. Any ideas or any problems faced, fire them in, and we'd love to hear more.
So Brendan, there's a question here about: someone asked a question earlier about whose responsibility to find out what the standards are, etc. The answer is focused on what was available and not the responsibility in general. In general, who in force should be looking at the standards before they move forward?
Oh no, that's going to vary. I mean, it depends on what area you're working. If you're a developer, then there's going to be a lot of technical standards that your designers and your programmers will need to look at. If you're working in data, if you're in data analytics, then the data officers should be looking at these standards. We don't expect people to constantly look at the standard site every day. But we expect it will kind of align to that little process that Matt demonstrated earlier, to the life cycle of when you should think of adopting the standard. So it's just very much at the initiation of a new program or a new project, and then the decommissioning stage as well, or just whenever you're making big changes. As to who, it kind of falls to everybody in the team. I don't think there's one person.
It's about designing the right approach, isn't it? So before we start procuring, we need to design what we want to actually solve, and standards can be part of helping us to achieve that. The one last question before we start to wrap up: some of the standards are behind paywalls. I don't think it's a paywall. Yes, in relation to the ISO standards 27000, etc. Can the Knowledge Hub arrange for licensed copies to save us buying them all? I'm not sure if you've heard that question before, Brendan.
Well, we are actually doing a piece of work on that, David. So we have, in one of our newsletters, in one of our community newsletters, we asked the community which ISO standards they would find most valuable. We're trying to compile a top 10 list of the ISO standards that policing want the most, and then we're going to see if we can actually negotiate to make those ISO standards available to everyone in policing as part of one deal, rather than forces going individually.
Oh, that's fantastic, and it's great that you're doing that one. So start to wrap up now. We're approaching past. So just a quick reminder of the up and coming events. Do get involved. Again, we've got the top tips for anybody using 365, and just think about the work that we've developed with the NEP, with the national standards, the national blueprints, and the benefits we are seeing of that, of enough local flexibility, but of course that's standards effectively in the technical blueprint for NEP. That will enable you to pick up things like the stop and search scrutiny, which we're featuring with a force the following weeks, and then the collaboration workshop. And again, because we've all achieved the same standard, it means we can do the federation that we spoke about before. Do join us for our next webinars. Keep the subjects coming in. We want to hear about what you want us to feature from the wider police digital service, from the delivery of the police digital strategy, whatever it is that you want us to cover. This is what the webinars are designed to do. So thanks for joining us again today. Hope to see you next week, and take care. See you soon.